In continuing the discussion on dimensions, I show in this video my standard methods and procedure. And I should point out that the dimensioning features I show are all available in the free or make version of SketchUp. I like to mix up the dimension views, some in perspective, others in orthographic, and also in very close detail. Here is a queen-size bed I've shown in a previous blog entry that I will use for my dimensioning example. I like to have a conventional orthographic front, top, side view with a few important overall dimensions. And these dimensions, of course, are all orthographic. But when you get to the components like this head post, dimensioning becomes more complicated, mainly because of the joinery. First, I like to have an overall perspective view of a dimensioned component. And I will apply some basic overall important dimensions, pulling them out in the proper axis orientation. Here's the overall height or length of the post, or the head post, and the location of this square to shaped section down here is important, 10 inches above the ground. Here is the distance above the ground, the end of the post, to the bed bolt hole. And I'd like to know the length of the square section of the head post. Up at the top we have some sockets that hold the headboard in place. The location of those sockets is important, and I'll pull those out on the red axis. The height of the socket itself, 1.5 inches. And then I would like to have the dimension, the separation between these two sockets, pulling out on the same red axis. And that's probably about all the overall dimensions that I would like to show on the overall perspective view. I'm going to move that text position to the outside end. There it is. That should be a little bit clearer. And I probably should drag out that overall dimension a little bit. And now I'm ready to place these dimensions into a specific layer, not layer 0. I'll select everything and then deselect the component, which will be layer 0. I don't mess with that. But now all the dimensions are selected, and I'm going to place them into the perspective layer, so they won't show up in other scenes. And here we have the scene of the, and I'm only applying the perspective, and you can see the other front, side, top detail layers that I'm going to be using. And now I want a front view orthographic template of the head posts, the same instance of the component. Here it is, showing the perspective dimensions on it, which I'll fix later, but I need the camera in a parallel projection mode. And then I will create a new scene called the template orthographic front view, and set the layer of this, take off, uncheck perspective, and check front view. So now any dimensions that I place in this view won't show up in the previous perspective view, and also I'm free to put whatever dimensions I want here without it interfering with those dimensions that I placed previously in the perspective view. Although many of these dimensions will actually be the same ones that I've placed in the perspective view, but there will probably be some differences, maybe not so many in this case. Here I'm going to locate where that recess goes for the rail, the bed rail, and the length of that recess socket for the bed rail. That's about it again. I could look at the entity information on that and convert to align with the dimension, but I have space here. I don't have to. If I wanted to squeeze these dimensions, I could. Again, I'll select all, then deselect the component itself and set all of the dimensions to the front view. So now if I go back to the perspective, I don't have these dimensions on that one, vice versa. Each view has its own dimensions without interfering. But I haven't done anything to identify the detail around this joint. And I need some very precise dimensioning here for the layout of the joint details in the shop. So I create a new scene, close-up scene, perspective. I'll call it the joint scene, and the layers for these dimensions, I'll uncheck the front, there they go, and put in, check the detail. So now only the detail dimensions will show up in this scene. And the style, I'm going to change that to X-ray so that I can see the joint, how it protrudes into the component, and I can see the dimensions inside the component. Okay, so detailed dimensions like the distance up from the square section, the base of the square section, so I can now in the shop precisely locate these sockets, these recesses, and precisely locate where to drill for the bed bolt on the drill press. Also the distance off the edge, 11/16. Move that around so it's clear. I'd like to know the depth of that recess, 7/16. Move that, shift that around so it's in the clear. And then the length of that tenon. We've got a tenon joint in one of the rails, and then we've got a bed bolt joint on the other rail. The width of that recess, again, locating that. And that's probably about all I need in the shop to lay out precisely how that joint works. I don't need to do a right to left. I can do a left to right selection here, which selects all the dimensions. I'll move those to the detail layer. And that's it. I can go over to the joint and see the joint dimensions, go back to the perspective, and I will not see the detail. If I do turn on the detail layer, you can see that it's quite a mess. That won't work, so separating these into multiple scenes works best for me.